Welcome back to my channel. This is another build video, and this is the Batmobile from the older movie, the Batman and Robin movie. This is an older model kit, and it's a fairly simple kit. There aren't many parts to it, and requires a fair amount of work to get it together. So I use the side clippers here, as you can see, to get rid of most of the sprue parts on the or sprue edges, and then I sand off the remaining. This is a nail file, the rough side and then sharp side, and then after that I will use some sandpaper or a file. Once that is smooth, then move on to the next section until finally all of it is ready. As you can see here, the engine was molded in at the bottom. So this is the chassis, and needed some work to be able to get it to come together. Finally, there's the sandpaper, you can see, just to smooth out the scratches from the file. So I like to use this Revell Contactor Professional because it has a very fine metal tip and deposits only small amounts of glue, but you certainly can put too much on. This is gluing on the cockpit. I actually ended up having to tape it because, as you'll see here, it kind of falls right off. So I did put some tape on, and this held in place until the glue was dry. And this doesn't take too long with this glue. The problem with this model is that because it's old, it's not very well made, and so the parts don't fit together very well. This back piece didn't have any notches or pins to be able to go in, so at this point you really had to just push it up against the back and then hold it in place with some tape until it was finally dry. It was actually quite frustrating. I am putting glue in the creases here just to help cement that in and hold that. Now I'm going to be working on the wings for the Batmobile, and using the just regular thickness glue and putting those two pieces together. It did require a fair amount of trimming as well to get the sprue pieces or flashing off. I use these clothespins to help hold some pressure while it dries, and also sometimes I will tape them, but this one required lots of pins or clothespins to be able to get it together. And then I use the Tamiya extra thin cement because that tends to seep right into the crevices and seal up the rest of it. Now this is the other side. As you can see, I'm getting a good amount of glue throughout the entire wing to be able to get good contact. And so same thing with this side, using the clothespins to hold it together. The advantages of using that extra thin cement is it doesn't leave a lot of residue on the outside, so you don't get these big clumps of glue or melted plastic that are very visible. So now that this body part has dried here, now I am using some Vallejo plastic putty to fill that edge. It was quite a big gap, and ended up having to, well, I guess there was too much liquid in there, wipe that off and then fill that hole there. So this plastic putty does dry pretty quickly, and you can use it for all kinds of edges. I don't use it to build up any holes because it doesn't fill holes well and hold it, but it certainly does help to fill creases, and so that's why I like it for this area here. I'm using a Q-tip or earbud to be able to wipe off the excess and make sure I get it all the way into that corner, but as you can see, it does kind of leave a lot on there and tends to smear it around, so I usually use multiple earbuds. So once that's there, I will then wipe it off, and it comes off very easily as long as it's fairly still soft and pliable. But once it starts to harden, you definitely can't do that, so make sure you get it done early. So now I'm just using this as a rounded file just to round off those corners, make sure I've removed as much of the putty as possible, and that also helps to get into the corners. You can see it's removing it fairly easily, and then you get to dust it off or blow off the extra. So now we're back with the wings, and I am using this nail file to sand the edges. It glued together quite well, but there definitely was a rough edge to it, and so I smoothed it all out with the rough and smooth portion of the nail file. Now once that's done, now I use a piece of sandpaper. This is a 320 grit sandpaper, and make sure I get into all the little edges and corners, and smooth off the scratches. Now we're going to glue those wings onto the main body because I want to paint all of that on together. Colors that are going to be the same, or parts are going to be the same color, I generally tend to put together and then spray them all at once. So these parts are not interchangeable. You need to make sure you get the right one. So now I've got the chassis on the body, and I've got some edges there that need to be sanded. So this is also again using the nail file and in a metal file just to smooth out the edges. So now we're starting to paint, and this is a black Vallejo primer, and I'm using this for the whole body. It does spray very well, but you do have to thin it, so I use airbrush thinner also from Vallejo to thin the acrylic paints, and I think I gave this 2 coats of the black paints. Same thing with the little turbine here, because I'm going to be painting that silver. So you can see how I'm covering up the putty as well, and it's definitely spraying well. I typically have to spray this in sections, so I'll spray the front and then the back, or the top and then the bottom, allowing it time to dry so I can hold it or turn it around. So now these chrome portions here for the engine pieces, I wasn't really entirely happy with them as they were, so I decided to try and use some weathering, and you can see the difference between the two. One is extremely bright and the other one's not so bright, and has some interesting features with the shadows. And then once it's kind of partly dry, I will wipe away some of it with a Q-tip, and this just helps to absorb some of it, leaving the parts that are recessed showing up some of the dark. Now these are the wheels here, and they've also got chrome on them, so I was going to put the little caps on there, and so I had to do this with super glue, and those are the Batmobile Batman hubcaps. And so super glue holds the plastic onto that chrome, whereas if you use regular plastic glue, it would not work. Once that's dry, this wasn't quite dry, as you can see, it didn't move around. I did the same thing in terms of weathering here. This is just an acrylic coating for the wheels, just to show a little dirt. I only wanted it to be on the inside of the wheel and not on the wall, so I did remove that with this Q-tip or earbud, and they are fairly absorptive, but obviously you just discard them at the end. Now we're putting the tires on, and they fit together fairly easily. They're all the same size, and I'll be back with the body, and I wasn't entirely happy with the job that I'd done. So the wings are dry now, and so I decided to fill those as well, again with the plastic putty, and then smearing off the rest of it with a Q-tip, and then finally my finger. And this is a better fill job rather than the Tamiya putty. Now I wanted to paint the lower part of the transmission, and so this is in silver. It definitely is much better over a black base. But to be honest, you're not going to see a whole lot of it, and there's no more detail than just this. So, but I decided to paint it anyway, and so I used a acrylic silver and painted it over by hand because it was just too annoying to mask it off. And then once that was done and dried, I used the acrylic weathering again to give it some shadows. Now the front, I decided I wanted to have this silver again, so this I definitely did mask off and spray, and it came out quite nicely. Same thing with the turbine, sprayed that silver, and it shows up so much better if it's got a black base. It did require several coats to be able to get that finished look. Now once that was dry, I used a light blue, and this is the transparent blue, that way it enabled to show up the silver behind it, and I hand painted these on. They do have some recesses or edging that you can run your brush against and keep in that area, and so I decided to do this by hand rather than mask it off and spray it. It was a little annoying and frustrating to do this, but finally I managed to get it all done, and it all worked out. Now once that was all dry, Next, I moved on to the decals. Now, these decals are really old. As you can see, they're quite yellowed. But once I had put them on and then also washed them a fair amount with some decal solution, the yellowing did go away. Also required a fair amount of work because the decals had to be set back for that wider diameter. It was quite a frustrating process with these decals. I think that's just really just part of the older kit. And I probably could have used some more water to be able to help it to float and move better, and then absorb it afterwards. Finally, here's the last decal. By now, I'd kind of figured out how to do it, how to rotate it on there, and then to get it to line up. But all in all, that worked out. So now I'm back to the body and filing down or sanding down the fill area at the wings. And for this, I wanted a finer finish than the file, that regular metal file, so I used some sandpaper on the file to be able to get the profile or the shape of that inside, and then sanded it down that way, and for the most part it did work out. Now once that's all done, I decided to spray it again. So I gave it a good coating. The first coating wasn't as good as I was hoping, but this now is looking a whole lot better, and getting the whole thing sprayed both inside and out with the Vallejo black primer. Now we're taking off the masking tape for that front grille, and we're going to glue on the turbine. Again, this is with super glue because it's already painted, and definitely wait until those decals are dry because they will come off too easily. Glued it in with super glue. This is the engine bay going in, and there's one little area that it has to sit against, otherwise it's pretty mobile and can flop around. So make sure that you have it exactly where you want when it's going to be drying, otherwise it won't. You can see there it can sit pretty much anywhere. Now we're gluing on the front. This is the front grille, which has the turbine as well, and I did that with super glue as well. Again, there aren't many good parts there to line it up. So now this is one of the most frustrating parts of this kit, is trying to get the chassis on. Definitely make sure that your glue is all dry, because otherwise all those parts are going to come off inside. But this is one of 6 different clips of me trying to get this chassis onto the body, and it was very frustrating, and finally I managed to get that on like that by putting the back in first and then finally the front. And then I did glue it in using just the medium thickness glue, making sure I got the back and the front, so it was going to be solid. Now I did tape that together to allow it to dry, and now I'm gluing on these back fenders, again using the thicker glue, and the back fenders go on. They have to line up because there's no pin for it to lock onto, so just try your best to line them up. And then I do use tape, as you can see here, to hold it in place while it dries, and then filling the cracks with the extra thin cement. Now this is the other side, and definitely did a better job of this side lining it up. Had some experience with the left side. So once that's all dry, then there's still some rough parts to this, so I sanded it, and that's with a 220 grit sandpaper, and to get rid of the bumps, and then ultimately sanded it with some smoother parts. So here you can see I'm just touching up some of these areas of the silver, and did this by hand. Now the back fenders need to be sprayed as well, and this was done with the black primer. Now once this was done, I actually did a second coat of that. Then I did hand brush some of the little details, because especially the glued areas where the paint wasn't showing up so well. And then here you can see, here's the second coat of the black primer. Now the back lit up area I painted with a light blue, and did this also by hand, and I think it came out quite nicely. I did steady my hand. As you can see, I'm using my fifth finger there to steady my hand on that wing, and that helps to minimize any shake or tremor as you're painting. And then did it from the other side, because it's definitely easier to get that fine little brush into the corner rather than do it the other way. So work my way up and down on both sides with that light blue. Now these last few areas are difficult to get to because the wings are in the way, and so you kind of have to do it from above, and that's definitely more challenging. Now I'm putting decals on. I'm going to do this before I seal the model, and that's the Batman logo going to the back, and then the instrument panels for the front. Several of them are individual, and then there is a cluster, so that one's another individual one. And sometimes they're difficult to get off the brush, and so I use either a Q-tip or these tweezers to be able to get it to where I want it to be. Here's the other instrument panel going in there, and this is also put in with the micro set and micro sole, to be able to get it to sit down a little better, stick better, and then also to be able to soften up so they can take some of the shape. So the blue one I use first, and then the red one I use second. Now when you've got fluid underneath, either water or decal adhesion, you do need to get rid of most of it so it can sit properly, and I do this by squeezing out most of that with a Q-tip or an earbud. And now the last few of these decals are going on, and as you can see, this definitely has yellowed somewhat, but it did turn out okay once I had removed some of that decal glue adhesive behind it with some microset and washed it away. So here I am. You can see I'm pushing it in with the Q-tip and getting rid of that extra fluid. You can do it with the back of a paintbrush, but it doesn't absorb the fluid like the Q-tip does. Here's the micro sole that's going on, and that helps to soften the decal and let it adhere to the shape underneath of it. So now once that's dry, and I let it dry for at least a day, now this is the clear, and I use the floor polish for this. I spraying on the clear on the underside and let it dry, and then spray on the top side. Now this is a very light coating, just to be able to get something for it to grip to. And then as you can see now, I'm doing a much thicker coating, and it's starting to be a bit more shiny. There was some dust particles, and so I ended up using the sandpaper to get rid of most of those, make sure it's smooth. This is 1000 grit sandpaper. Now we're starting the clear varnish again, and spraying this down till I get a nice glossy finish. And it took multiple coats to be able to get it the way that I wanted to do, as well as have some thickness to sand and polish. So here you can see another coat going on. This is now the front once the underside is dry. I did actually get the Tamiya painting base, and it turns, so it makes it very easy to paint something. You can rotate it and get all the different angles. So here you can see I'm painting the tail lights now, and painted these with a transparent red. I want to be able to see some of the silver behind it. And then here's the steering wheel, painting the steering wheel black, but leaving some of the chrome visible. I use the primer, black primer, because it adheres very well to pretty much any surface. It does have that little Batman symbol, which I left. Now while that's drying, I'm giving the car another coat of the clear floor polish, and it's starting to be really shiny now. And that ended up looking quite nice by the end, with a nice shine. So this is just regular car polish. I didn't really do a lot of sanding after this because it was pretty smooth, and now I'm just buffing off. This is on my high-speed Dremel, and I've got a medium softness foam brush, and so that helps to just sort of buff out the polish on the car and gives it a fairly nice shine. So going around and around the entire car took a little while, not too long. The Dremel definitely makes it faster. Now we're making the Batman, and the Batman, it was okay. It required a fair amount of edge removal, so I sanded it down and then used the Tamiya extra thin cement just to help smoothen those lines. It helps to, what it does is it melts rough little edges and can smooth those out. So here's the body going together, and again I just used the extra thin cement to get into those little cracks that wouldn't leave behind a big chunk of glue. This wasn't exactly what I was going for, but finally managed to get that piece to sit together because it wouldn't quite fit in. But now that that's done, body and legs are glued together, and like I said, this is an old kit. Things don't fit together all that well, but it's one of the few kits that you can get for this model. Now we're putting the arms on, now that the body and legs are dry, and again use extra thin cement to help to fill those gaps, and then putting the other arm on. I actually did end up putting it inside the car, just so I could get the angle for the arms right, and that helped me to get the correct position. Then took it out of the car so I knew what angle to glue it at. Now I did sand off some of those rough edges where they were glued, and then smooth it over with some sandpaper as well as this metal file. Here's the sandpaper, smoothing it over, and you can see how I'm moving my hand backwards and forwards so you don't get any flat spots. It keeps it round, and overall gives a much better look. But this is a 220 grit. Now we're painting the figurine black, and this is again with the Vallejo black primer. Now the badge or insignia was supposed to be yellow on the front, and so I did this by hand, and it was a little challenging to paint because the lines aren't perfect and they aren't easy to get into, so it did require a little bit of touch-up. And here I had some very liquid. I wanted to make it just sort of seep in there, and it actually worked out quite well just by adding a little bit of water to the paint. So then I did the belt, and the back of the belt you're really not going to see because he was going to be glued in, but just in case there's a little piece that you could see, I did decide to go ahead and paint that. So now that that's all done, I did the face, and this is with the Tamiya flesh color. Some of the other flesh colors I don't really like. They just don't look they don't look human, but it did require 2 coats because it was on a black base. So don't forget, you've got to leave the mask black. Now I'm doing touch up here of the bat insignia, and this is with a very fine brush, and I'm using the black paint again just to be able to get that the yellow off the bat. Now once that was done, I did seal it with this is a matte clear coat, and this actually ended up doing 2 coats. So now I'm gluing in the steering wheel and using the super glue because that'll help it to stick onto the paint, and it was a pain. It kept falling off. It was difficult to get in, and finally just ended up having to hold it in place. Now next is to glue in the figurine, and probably should put the steering wheel in afterwards, but anyway, we certainly tried it. So I did put a lot of super glue on the bottom and finally got the figurine to stick. Now the wheels are on these metal axles. They're a little loose and rickety, and I did put some glue in there just to help the metal to stick in there, but who knows if it actually helps. And same for the rear axle, glue on both edges, putting it through, and then putting the other wheel on. So these wheels do roll because they're not glued to the chassis. And now we're putting in the rear brake lights, and these are an absolute pain to get on. Required multiple attempts, and I ended up getting glue on the back of the model, which I had to then wipe off and repolish. So you can see I'm really struggling, but finally this is the third attempt, and it's just showing the only successful one on camera. But what I actually did this time for the right hand one was to put the glue on the area where it's supposed to be, and then get the part and put it in, and that ended up working much better than putting the glue on the parts. But it really struggled to get it in there, and it was definitely a frustrating part of this model. Okay, so now we're on to the clear, and these are the lights in the front, and I painted some silver on the inside, leaving the clear on the outside, and this was hopefully going to make it a little bit more reflective or look like some actual lights. And now we're gluing on the parts onto the front, which is with super glue. So those lights are going on the front there with that super glue, and these fit together fairly well, but there was nothing to hold them in place, no pin, so put them as best as you can. Now we're putting on the silver guards for the front, and dry fit these definitely before you put them on with glue, because I put one on that I did not dry fit, and ended up having to remove some glue from the front of the model. You can see this one doesn't fit well either, but with some wiggling backwards and forwards, managed to get it to go into the holes. And you need to make sure that you get them straight, because they do wiggle around until the glue is dry. So now I'm doing the windshield, and I did this with some super glue. That windshield required some polishing. I probably shouldn't have used super glue, because it does tend to fog up the clear parts, but this was so open to air that it ended up working well. Now we're doing the chrome on the rear fenders, and same thing, make sure you dry fit them before you put them on with glue, and then you can make sure that they are aligned and straight. The exhausts also do not fit well. There's this tiny little notch that it needs to fit in. It falls out very easily, so don't push it too hard. Definitely dry fit them to make sure that you get the correct angle, and that you're happy with the seating. Well, with this, the model is now finished, and here are the pictures. Enjoy it.